Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Outpost. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, for one, I love the whole Janzo and Ren thing. Obviously, it's been clear from the beginning, like, what was going to happen, but I love that spark between them, especially because, like, you have Talon being like, oh, you're super into her, aren't you? He's like, oh, you know, what's not to be? She's like you. She's super brave, she's beautiful, but she has the added bonus of being smart. And Talon's like, hey, he's like, no, I mean, you're street smart, but she's Janzo smart. And so it's like, oh, it's so adorable. It's like, you're so smitten, dude. I love it. But the fact of the matter is, obviously, you have, as we know, an infected Gwen coming in being like, oh, hey, and she's kind of high on life, acting not herself. It's like, yeah, life is better, wouldn't call it wonderful. No, it's great. It's like, oh, like, you know, what's not, oh, she's not acting like herself, because even Talon's like, what's up with you? She's like, oh, so where's Garrett? Oh, you know, I just need to know where Garrett is. Where's Garrett? And it's like, okay. I was hoping that Talon wouldn't actually tell her, but it's like, well, you trust Gwen. Gwen would never, obviously Gwen cares very deeply about him, so what else would there be, you know? So, of course, it'd be a situation of like, okay, like, you know, she tells Gwen, obviously because of her and Yavala being of a hive mind, it allows Yavala to know, so she ends up sending some Black Bloods to kill him. Well, not even kill him. The whole point was also bring him into the fold, because the whole point is to unite everybody, Black Bloods and humans, under, well, obviously Yavala's control. And so, because at first that confused Talon, because it's like the only other person who knows Garrett's down there is Janzo. He wouldn't tell, so the only person would be Gwen. So it's like, why'd you do it? And she's like, well, so that part of me was wondering whether or not that was real or not, like Gwen, because I was like, part of me wonders, was there some part of Gwen still there or what? And so I thought that was so fascinating with that whole situation, because obviously Yavala can kind of, obviously she's sensing, she's hearing the conversation, she sees and hears what Gwen. Oh, it's not just because obviously they, and especially later on, they think it's just hearing and what you hear and see. It's like, no, they know, like, she's in your mind. What you know, she knows. You didn't even have to say it, because I guess maybe it not only connects, it doesn't just connect your, like, senses to each other. It makes it so that I think your brain, I mean, everything's tied to your brain. Your brain controls your entire body. So it's like literally an instant kind of latching onto your brain. It's actually kind of interesting, because it kind of reminds, I was just thinking about it a little bit. It kind of reminds me of the whole situation. Because I made reference to, like, the City of Light in the 100. You know what else I could also compare it to? It's like Killjoys. The whole, that whole situation with, like, the Holland situation, to a certain extent. Like, yeah, that's, you know, if you haven't seen Killjoys, I won't really go too much into it, but it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, too. I never even thought about that, so just, because remember, there was, like, the whole, like, you can remember Pip was infected by those spiders, those Holland spider things, that whole situation. But nevertheless, like I said, I'm going on a tangent and all that. But obviously, Yavala kind of shifts the situation and have Gwen tell Talon off. And Talon's like, yeah, something's not right, you know, about the whole thing. And then we also see that it's not, and then we see that the Kinj inside of Gwen splits. So it's not just the ones that are inside of, like, it's the queen bee, essentially. The one inside of Yavala is the queen bee, making her the queen bee. So basically, I was wondering if it has to start with her, but it's like, no, each one can spread too. So obviously, we see her later on spreading it to Sammy. Because I was wondering, like, was she going to use Sammy for something else? But it's like, no, use him for close proximity, and then him passing on and passing on. Something that came up in this episode that makes me wonder is it going to have a different effect? Like, because obviously, like, because we saw it kind of affecting, because at first, Yavala was even having a headache, but then Gwen was too, so it's like, you know, but then, like, Sammy, he was kind of looking sick, but then he passed it on. It looked like he might have been better, but at the same time, it seemed like he was still sick, so part of me is like, the Kinjs are meant to be used by Black Blood, so maybe a normal, because obviously that's a conversation that comes up between Ren and Janzo, the physiology between, you know, and like, oh, are they that different? It's like, well, you have Black Blood, you have, and your ears, but that's the only difference. Like, other than that, humans, but that Black Blood might be the deciding factor when it comes to their physiology that makes it so a Kinj even if someone, even in like a human might not be able, like a human's not meant to have a kinge, so maybe it's too much for their body to handle. So part of me wonders, like, eventually will every human that's infected eventually die because it will kill them, or because we haven't seen it have long last. We haven't seen what it's done to, because obviously, like I said, Yavala had the headaches, but maybe it's like every time it splits, the other versions take more and more of a toll. So maybe like Sammy, because his is split off from Gwen's, he would actually get sick and die first before Gwen does, because hers was kind of like the second one. But maybe every generation, every split makes it take more and more of a toll on a human body, or maybe just naturally it takes a bigger toll on a human body. I'm curious to find out if that ends up being the case. I might be reading too much into that, but Sammy's condition just makes you think like it seems like it has an effect on humans that it might not on Black Bloods. But like I said, we haven't really had big enough experience with that. But I thought was interesting. Well, circling back to it, the back and forth between Janzo, because obviously like Ren's kind of laying all that down at first and he's not getting it, and then she brings up the whole thing about reproductive organs, and he's like, what? And she's like, oh, you're so cute when you're nervous. She's like, me nervous? What would I be nervous? Are you nervous? She's like, no. And he's like, oh, look, go refill the drinks and stuff like that. Then the whole thing later on, he's like, oh, this box, craftsmanship. She's like, yeah, I got all these tools. He's like, yeah, I made them with my hands. She's like, you're pretty good with your hands, aren't you? He's like, I'd even say so myself. And it's like, about our experiment. What experiment? The one between humans and a Black Blood. He's like, oh, and it's like them having their moment, I thought was so adorable. I was like, and them just being nervous, like them trying to turn both of them, turning their heads the same way to kiss each other. And it's just like this awkward thing, and then they get to it, and then they get to it. I'm like, dude, you kind of feel so happy for Janzo, dude. You're like, yeah, because like you two are like made for each other. You two are like such an adorable couple. So I just thought that was pretty dope. So on top of all of that, there's a whole situation with Talon confronting Yavala, and then Yavala trying to pass it on, but it didn't work because she doesn't know what Talon knows. Talon and Zed are the only ones who know that kinges don't work on people. A kinge can't work on another person with a kinge, and she didn't know that. I was like, yeah. So I was like, because Zed didn't. I mean, I guess it makes sense. I mean, why would you need to tell anyone that? I mean, because even Zed says it later on. I'm like, why would I need to? It doesn't. The circumstances never really came up where that was really necessary information. I didn't really think about it, but because of that, sadly, which is interesting too, because we also see that the transfer can be stopped midway through. It's not like it paralyzes you. You still have free will, so you can get away. If you can get away, you can get away. But most of these people aren't suspecting it. Like, who's going to know? Like, oh, this is happening. It's just like, like unless you're looking for it, you won't know that it's happening. So I thought that was kind of fascinating, and obviously, Talon comes back to tell Janzo. Garrett saw Sammy pass it on to a Black Blood, so now it's like, okay, so now they're all in the know about it, and it's like, because even she had asked, like, can a kinge split? It's like, it seems like this kinge's special ability. No, it doesn't seem like any other kinge can reproduce. But which makes me like, they haven't got to this, but I'm assuming because of the whole hive mind thing, you have to go to the source. I mean, maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. Maybe even if you manage to destroy the one that's inside of Yavala, it still might not be enough. But I think it's the core. It's the original. So you kill it, probably every other like kinge dies. Like it's probably like the heart and soul. Like I said, it's the hive mind. You destroy the center of the hive mind, the original, then it probably, I would assume, destroy everything else. Not unless it's going to be an effed up thing where it's like if you kill that kinge, it kills everyone else that's infected with it, which it might be a thing of some of them are already dying anyway, so it might be, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if, what they ultimately end up doing with that, like how that situation plays out. But along with all of that, it's interesting that these are the only technically 5 people, because obviously we know Talon and Zed are immune. It's like they're literally the only people in the entire, not just the entire outpost, the entire world that can't be affected by that. So it makes sense. But obviously Garrett isn't in the know about it, and then obviously they try to bring it up to Zed. Zed doesn't want to listen because he's like, why don't you open a gate to paradise? She's like, okay, you got me. It doesn't necessarily open up paradise, but it helps us find paradise in ourselves, which sounds very cultish when you actually think about it, which I think is kind of very befitting in this situation. But Zed is so loyal, because that's why she didn't have to worry about it, because she knows like, well, I might not be able to infect you, but I still got you on my side. Right? He's so loyal, she doesn't have to worry about bringing him into the fold of the United. It's like, you're already a part, like, you believe in me so much. But like, because now it begs the question, because it makes you wonder the entire time, like, what has been her goal? Like, she's made this whole point about paradise, but because that part of me was like, did the Kinge infect her when it got inside of her, and this is what it wants? But it's like, no. It's her will. This has always been her will. So maybe this has something to do with Talon's dad too. Like, her dad was protecting his box. She said like, oh, your dad died. It's like, no, she probably killed your dad to get that box because he knew the truth about this whole thing. So it's like, this has always been her goal. It's like, because I guess it's like to have power over someone is kind of what, like I said, not unless it's the Kinge, but it seems like this is Yuvala's thing, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe she was wrong, misinterpreted what the Kinge was about, or maybe she always knew. You had the feeling like she had to have always known, because she's willing to sacrifice anything, even let her own daughter die, to the point where Ram was like, oh, you were going to let me die. I think you owe me an apology. She's like, okay, sure, do that. What? You want to apologize? Wait, you want to hug me? What's up with you? Something's wrong with you. You've never wanted to apologize. You've never wanted to hug me. It's like, oh, bring you into the fold. But like, luckily Ren got away in time. I was like, that's going to suck if you get infected. Because then like, Janso was like, I mean, because I would suck, because I was like, oh, don't let that complicate things between Janso and her. But it's like, oh, no, they're on the same side. It's good. She hasn't been infected, so they're still together and everything. So, but once again, it shows that it can be stopped if you can stop it. But most people aren't really suspecting it. And so when the time actually comes, But like I said, Zed is initially not listening to them because, it's like Yuvala, she's their high priestess. She has never lied to us. And then he sees that Garrett's alive. And so that stops him. It's not until Rin shows up that changes everything, because for him, it's like, oh, you're going to listen to Rin, but you're not going to listen to us. It makes sense. Rin is her daughter. If her own daughter is willing to say, my mom's on some shady shit, like, of course you're going to listen, because especially for him, it's like, that means, because he's a believer. He wholeheartedly believed in this thing, and it's like, it turns out it's an entire lie for her to control you. Once again, very cultish. It's like you followed this person, you believed in them so wholeheartedly, they're going to lead you to paradise, and then it's like, oh, it turns out it was a lie, that it's a scheme for her to have more power, potentially. Like, I don't know. I mean, because I think that's so interesting, because it's not just because for him, it's like, when basically the Black Bloods were basically at war with each other in the Plain of Ash, like, Yuvala's the one that brought them together. She kind of ended like things before things got too, well, they were probably already bloody, but like before things got too bad, she united everybody. So of course, like, he's going to have an affinity because she's this high priestess. So like, obviously she kept us together. She kept us strong. So obviously Zed's going to be reluctant to, but it's like, obviously it's like, she was kind of like their hope and everything. And for her to be like, oh, she's on some power trip and shit. Like, of course it's going to hit you a certain way. So now it's like, what do? Literally the entire outpost is infected. We don't know who we can trust. All we can trust are the people in this room. Obviously Zed and her are no issue, but at the same time, there's a whole thing with Tobin and Mutt. They meet up with Gertie. And I love the whole thing. Oh, your sister, she died. Here's her pipe. It's like, I don't smoke. You keep it, which is kind of shitty, because it's like, oh, this is your sister's. But even her being like, shut up, Mutt. He's like, you really sound like your sister just now. Because obviously, Tobin doesn't have as many men as he was hoping. He only had like 100. Because most of them died or either got hurt fighting the Prime Order. It's like, you were supposed to be recruiting people. It's like, yeah, some women have signed up. Other than that, all we have are the elderly and children. So now it's a decision on, what do we do? Well, lo and behold, he finds out that his old flame, Felista, has returned. Her husband, because she was married off because of an arranged marriage, he's dead. I'm here for you. Gertie's all about it, which is like, oh, you said the Outpost is in the situation it's in. You're not technically married to Gwen anyway, so this way we get what we want. I mean, to be fair, we found out last season Gertie's whole thing. Like, she's an opportunist. Like, she's in a position, because if he's powerful, it makes her powerful. That's what it all comes down to. She's not looking out for like, oh, I'm here for the greater good, doing what's best for everyone else. It's like, no, she's doing what's best for her and making what's best, so she's making it seem like, oh, what's best for you is what's best for everyone, but what's best for you is best for everyone, which is best for me, so. But even despite everything, Felista is super like, oh yeah, I want you. I want you and I want you now. It's like they've always had a thing, because it's like, oh, she's the love of your life. It's like, no, she was the love of my childhood. Gwen is the love of my life. But obviously for Felista, it's like, no, you think you love Gwen, but it's like, no, like, he legitimately has. Because even like Felista, I mean, even later on says like, no, you're going to marry me. eventually your heart will grow to the point that, given enough time, we'll be married, that you will eventually fall in love with me. And then Gertie's like, oh, that's ironic. You turned down her proposal, even though you made that exact same thing to Rossman. He was like, yeah, it didn't work. Yeah, but she's like, is it going to work on you? And it's like, that's the messed up thing, because it's like, he wants to be with Rossman because he legitimately loves Rossman. Yes, it was about the throne at first, just about the money and power, because they needed it. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, he cares about her, and also like he cares about the Outpost, so it's like he believes in his cause, he believes in Gwen, so he's willing to fight, even die for her. So it's like, that's devotion, he legitimately loves her, he believes in her, and so he's willing to do whatever. But Munt talks to him about it. It's like, yeah, it's like you kind of have you're in a no-win situation. You have to marry Felista to get her army, because you need an army to save Gwen, because if you don't save the army, in his mind is like, the Black Bloods might end up killing her. So it's like, well, the Black Fist in particular might kill her. So it's like, what do I do, And so, he's like, oh, like, you were a lot more, what was it, like astute or whatever, than people give you credit for. And then Munt was like, it wasn't astute, it was something else, wasn't it? But it was basically, Munt was like, what's that mean? It's like, I have to save Gwen. Yes, I love Gwen, but in order to protect her, I have to let her go, essentially. He's like, oh, and Munt's like, I said that. So obviously he marries Felista. He obviously doesn't want to, but it's kind of like, you really don't have much choice in this situation. It's just like, it is what it is. And it's just a really sucky situation. It's like, you have to, for him, it's like, I'm willing to sacrifice what I want if it means keeping Rossman alive, because that should be the most important thing. When you love someone, you're willing to sacrifice so much for it, which is obviously so interesting, because obviously the back-to-back is obviously like this whole thing about unity. Obviously, the episode of this week's episode of Supernatural, now this, and, loving someone and sacrificing. It's a whole thing, But obviously now, Tobin has his army, but it's like, yeah, go save Rossman, but then you're going to come back to me. So even when this is all said and done, this is going to complicate things, because it's like, this marriage is kind of, not only was it in front of the gods, it's also in front of like everyone. So you go back on this, it's going to cause some problems. So, that's a sad situation in its own right. But, when it's all said and done, Tobin's army shows up. But obviously, for Yavala, it's like, oh, this works out perfectly. Go over there and pass the gift on Gwen. And Gwen's like, okay, Tobin, you got this army. It's great. We can join yours with Yavala's. And the fact is, we can go after the three. Which I don't know if Yavala knows that. Well, she knows what they know. I guess that also proves maybe it's not as omniscient as you think it is. Because I guess Gwen didn't know that the Kinj can't affect other Kinjes as well. I guess the only people who would know that is, well, I guess Janzo would know, and Janzo would know, and probably, I guess Gwen never knew. I guess that information just never came back to her. Maybe, I don't know. Because, like I said, because Gwen didn't say anything about Garrett, but, like, immediately Yavala knew. But maybe, like I said, maybe it's just that first split, it brought a deeper connection in that regard. Whatever the case may be. But that's kind of interesting. Like, the three also have Kinjes too, so you wouldn't be able to get them under your control. But it's like, if you're able to basically control everybody, you could even eventually turn the Prime Order against them as well. Like, obviously that's what she's saying. Who's to say that's exactly what Yavala's saying? Like, Yavala, it's like, they've lived in the Plains of Ashes for so long. It's like, oh, like, she wants to be in this world and have everyone. It's like, in a twisted way, she is doing everything because she's bringing everyone together. Once again, as Ren said, but she forced it on us. Like, she's not giving anyone a choice. She's passing this on. Like, no one, if someone asks for it, that's one thing. But if you're just kind of forcing this down someone else's throat, that's another thing. But it's also because you're basically making people submit to you, become what you want them to be. And obviously Talon was trying to warn Tobin, but it's like, no, it's too late. If you go down there, Talon, you're going to expose us. Because once again, we're the only ones who are in the know about this. Because we have no idea how far this is spread in the Outpost already. I don't think Gwen passed it on to Tobin, because I think it's kind of that thing, kind of like Zed. Don't need to do it yet. I don't think it happened yet. Maybe it did, or maybe it's going to happen in between episodes. But I think it's the thing of like, as long as Gwen's able to kind of pull Tobin along, you don't really need that right now. So until it's 100% necessary, until you get them in close enough proximity, where you're able to do that without too many people around, and then you can slowly spread it around, But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.